Alright, so today's video is Subscriber Choice Monday's video from this past Monday. Lee M, shout outs to you for coming up with the idea that got the most comments, and since you commented first, you get the shout out. So today what we're going to be building is a hive top vent box that you guys can use to put on top of your hives in the wintertime or even the summertime, but primarily they work best in the winter for ventilating the hive and preventing condensation buildup, but they're great for in the summertime too. But I have another video on a double screened inner hive cover that if you want to use for ventilation in the summer you can use, or in the winter as well. I use them in the wintertime. I just put an empty hive top box, an empty honey super on top of them and fill it with wood shavings. But anyway, back to today's project. So thanks, man, Liam. And this video is for you, hive top vent box. Here we go. Alright, so for your first step, you're going to need to gather some materials together. This box does not need to hold any weight, so you won't have to use any special joinery whatsoever. A simple butt joint is more than sufficient. But what you will need is about 5 or 6 feet of scrap. It can be anything, white pine, cypress, whatever the cheapest wood in your area is. That's what I would make it from. And you'll need about, like I said, about 5 or 6 feet of it, depending on which size box you're making. And you'll need it about 3 inches wide, 2 to 3 inches. The width doesn't really matter. So just gather some scraps together and we'll get to start cutting this stuff. Quick safety announcement, as always, you guys don't see me wearing them because of the shot angles. Never work on any of your power equipment without safety glasses, hearing protection, a push stick, or a push block. You'll also notice that I don't have the blade guard on my blade, and the only reason that is for visual clarity so you guys can see the cuts better. I do not recommend removing your blade guard. I recommend keeping it on your saw at all times. Alright, what we've got here is 4 pieces, 2.5 inches wide. Right now they're 20 1/4 long. They've got to be cut to length. So we'll cut them to 19 7/8. 2 pieces cut to 19 7/8. Alright, so what you should end up with is 4 pieces that are 2.5 inches wide by 3/4 of an inch thick, if that's the thickness of the stock you're using. 2 of them are 19 7/8 inches long, and 2 of them are 12 1/4 inches long. We still have a little more prep to do on these. We need to drill some holes for the ventilation, and we'll do that with a drill and a drill bit. Alright, to prep these long boards, to drill them for the vent holes, get you a ruler, and what we're going to do is we're going to measure 1 1/4 inches from one edge, and do the same thing on the other end, making sure to measure from the same edge. I did this edge last time, so this edge this time. But it should work out perfectly. Okay, so you've got 2 marks, 1 1/4 inches, and all you're going to do is connect them with the ruler and scribe you a line between them. That'll be the line that we put the center of our bit on to drill our vent holes. Do that same thing with your second board. 1.25 inches. 1.25 inches. Connect your dots. If these aren't perfect, don't worry about it. Bees don't care if holes are exactly on center. Now we can drill our holes. To do that, I'm going to put 5 holes in here, roughly. So I'm going to just make some lines. They don't have to be exact. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5. So there, there, there. Do the same thing on your other board. Super simple. Not a whole lot of thought to this. You don't have to measure it out. If you're a perfectionist and they have to be exactly evenly spaced, then by all means go ahead and do that. But I'm not worried about it. This is the bit that I'll be using. This particular one you can pick up at any big box store. It's a 3/4 inch bit, and I'll be putting 3/4 inch holes for the vent in the wood. Now you can use a drill. If you have a drill press, use a drill press. That's what I have, so that's what I'm going to use, but a hand drill will work just as fine. Okay, so I've repeated that with the second piece. So now we have both drilled with 3/4 inch holes, about 5. If you use larger holes, you can do 4. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that's important is that you do not put your holes within 3/4 of an inch of the end of your boards. Okay, so don't do that. Now, all you need to do is do this same process to the 2 short boards. Start with making your line, then drill your holes, 4 or 5 holes, it depends on the size of the bit you're using. Just make sure that there are plenty of holes for ventilation. That's what we're doing. So what I'm going to do now is take the short boards and do the exact same thing to them. 1.5 inches, or I'm sorry, 1.25 inches is where I'm making my line for the center. One. Do the same thing to your next board. 1.25 inches from the edge. 1.25 inches from the edge. Scribe your line. On the short boards, I think I'm going to put 4 marks, or 4 holes. And again, this is not an exact science. The bees are not going to care. You just need to make sure that there's holes in it for adequate ventilation. There we go. So now I'll drill these holes.
Okay, so what we have is two 19 1/8 inch, or excuse me, 19 7/8 inch long boards. They're all 2.5 inches wide. The two long ones are 19 7/8 by 2.5 by 3/4, and the two short boards are 12 1/4 by 2.5 by 3/4. 12 1/4 inches is what length these need to be with a butt joint, which is what we're going to do. And a butt joint looks like this. You take your long boards, and it's called a butt joint because you just take your lumber and you butt it up against the end, and you'll do that on both sides. Since I'm using 3/4 inch stock, this 1.5 inches plus that 12 1/4 equals 13 3/4, which is the width of an 8-frame hive. If you're going to make 10 frame or 9 frame, this is the only piece that will change in dimensions. So let's go ahead and get it built, and then we need to put some hardware cloth on it to keep bugs from coming in your vent holes, as well as to keep the bees from coming up in it. One thing that we also need to mention, the type of fastener that you use is going to change your next steps. So if you're going to use a screw to put these together, then you want to pre-drill your holes. The reason is that the screws will split your wood. Anytime you're using screws in wood, you should pre-drill. I am going to be using a pneumatic nail gun that uses 18 gauge 2-inch long nails, and they're very thin, and glue. Always glue your joints even if you screw them. It'll keep the moisture out of the joint longer, and these will last longer. So let's go ahead and get it put together. Just a quick tip too, by the way, this is what I'll be using. It's an 18 gauge, this is a 15 gauge 2-inch nail. One thing that I did want to mention to you guys, if you do buy an air compressor and you're new to air tools, every single time you use an air tool, or at least once a day, so anytime you take it out to use it for the first time, always oil it. 3 drops of oil where the air connector connects to will keep this from rusting up and seizing up on you, and they'll last for years. Compressing air in a compressor causes condensation inside the tank, and a little bit of that moisture blows through the airline every time you use the tool. So always oil your air tools. Alright, so I'm going to take a long board and a short board. The short board goes inside the long board like so. So you butt the long board against the short board. That's how you put it together. But first we need some glue. Then just butt them up against each other. Make sure that outside edge is flush. Like so. And then you're just going to nail it, screw it, however you choose to connect it, that's up to you. Do the same thing to the bottom corner. Alright, so what you have now is a simple butt joint. This is what it should look like. I just put 2 nails and glue. Complete that for the other corners. Long side again butts up against the short side. Make sure it's flush on the outside edge and the top. Mine is. And then nail it. Do the same thing to the bottom edge. Now we rinse and repeat those steps for the other short board inside the two long boards again, remember. Always remember, you can never use too much glue, but it's easy to not use enough. So if you're worried about whether you have enough or not, put more on. You can always wipe off the extra as soon as you get it put together. So place your other board inside the two long boards. Get it lined up properly. Even on the top, even on this outside edge. And as soon as you have it even, nail it. Make sure everything's flush. Flush on the outside, flush on the top. Having it perfectly flush is what's going to keep your box nice and square. If it's not flush, it won't be square. Then just do the same thing to the bottom. You can flip it over. Pull everything together nice and tight. Make sure it's square. Pull it nice and tight. Make sure everything's square. Follow the same steps every time. Make nice square boxes. Now this extra glue that's dripping in here, just wipe it out. A wet washcloth works fine for that. I usually just use my finger, which is totally fine. Alright, so now what we have is a box, as you can see. Now what we need to do is put hardware cloth over each of these holes. Now I'm not going to cut them individually. I'm actually going to cut a strip that's long enough to fit all the way, and we'll staple that in place. One thing I did want to mention really quickly that you want to do before you do the hardware cloth is you want to make sure that the box is actually square. And to do that, you'll use a square like this, or you can use a speed square, which you can buy at any big box store for $3. And you want to make sure the corners are square. As you can see, this corner is perfectly square, and since this one's square, I know all the other ones will be. Now, what I'm going to do is let this dry like this, in place, square, before I start working on the wire cloth. So I'll be back in just a few minutes. Alright, my box is dried, the glue is set up. I wanted to talk about the hardware cloth I'm going to use for this job. You'll need to use number 8 hardware cloth. Now, number 8 cloth needs to be used because it's the only cloth that we as beekeepers really use that nothing can get through. So hive beetles can't get through number 8. Wax moths can't get number 8 through number 8. Bees can't get through it. Ants can get through it, but ants pretty much get through everything. So, but there won't be anything up in here that ants will likely want to be in, like wood shavings or something, which is what I would use in this. And I'll explain that at the end of the video. So get yourself some number 8 hardware cloth. If you don't have this, we sell it by the square foot, and we also sell it pre-cut to fit hives. So for instance, if you bought a piece of number 8 hardware cloth from us, pre-cut to fit an 8-frame hive, it would come the exact outside dimensions of this box, and you'd just staple it to the bottom. So that's an option for you. Just visit our website to check that out. So now we need to get the hardware cloth put on. I'll cut it into 1.5 inch strips, and those strips will be stapled to the inside of the box to cover the vent holes. Just Just make sure it's the right length where I need to cut it. And again, you guys can use a regular stapler. I happen to have an air stapler just because I build a lot of stuff. Place your hardware cloth on the inside and just give it a staple. All right, so this is what you want to end up with. Your piece of hardware cloth cut the exact size as your box, as you can see from these corners. Now we'll just staple it on. When I'm stapling hardware cloth on a box, I always like to start in one corner and then work around from that. So this way, and then down one edge. That way you can keep it pulled tight. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm going to pull this tight as I come down it with staples. I'm not going to do that corner yet. I want to come down this one as well so we can keep it lined up. So I'm just going to make it even with the wood and then staple it, pulling it tight with my thumb as I go. Alright, so what I have now is two edges. So what that allows me to do now is pull this corner from this direction and this direction to keep everything tight. And that's what I'll do, is just work it around slowly as I do that. So I'll pull this way to tighten this face, and I'll pull that way to tighten it going that way. Now I'll leave this corner not done and come down this edge, pulling it this way to tighten this, and this way to tighten it away from these staples. And you can see how this stretches a bit. See, watch. That's what you want it to do. So you pull all the slack out of it before you staple it. That way it doesn't sag over the winter time as it gets moist. Alright, so this is what we're left with. Nice and tight screen. Now, as you're stretching it, you're going to get a little bit of the hardware cloth coming around like this. So all I do for that, because you can't cut it at this point, is I use a craft hammer, okay, and then tap everything over all the way around the box if there are any pieces sticking out, and then just tap it flat. There, you can see it's gone now. And you can do that all the way around to get rid of these little edges if you want to. I don't, because these are quick and easy to make, and I usually don't keep them but for a couple of seasons before I replace them, so it's not a big deal to me. Alright, so you've got your box finished. You've drilled the holes for ventilation all the way around. Okay, you've put your screen on the inside of the box all the way around so bugs can't get in over the winter, or even in the summer. I guess you could use these as a ventilation shim in the summer as well and just not put anything in it. What I'm guessing you guys are asking though for is for a wintertime ventilation shim to keep condensation out of your hives, because that will kill your hives in the wintertime. You don't want the condensation from the bees respirating. That water from their breathing goes to the top of the hive to your inner cover, condenses on it, and then drips back down on the bees, and that can freeze your bees. Bees die all the time from condensation. This prevents that. So what are we going to put in this box? Now, one of you asked for a quilt box to be made. This is a quilt box. It's a ventilation shim, a quilt box. You can fold up a quilt and put in here. I don't understand why people use quilts when sawdust is free, so that's what I do. Alright, so now what you have is a vented hive box full of a material that's perfect for soaking up moisture in the wintertime. Anybody that has a wood shop that makes their own beekeeping equipment, what I would recommend that you do is keep a trash bag in your shop and keep it full of dust, of sawdust shavings like this. This is what I do. All you need to do next spring, after you're done with this, is take the box off and dump it out. Get a little bit of the small stuff that goes through, but that stops. That's all you need to do. This will soak up all the moisture in the wintertime. Another thing that you can do is to use this as your candy board. So, and I've got another video on making your own candy boards. Specifically, that's what I do in the wintertime. I put a candy board on my hives, and the sugar soaks up the moisture, so it doesn't condense in the hive, and it gives the bees an emergency food source. Anyway, that's what I do. So now you're ready to go. You've got a vented hive box shim. You've got some sawdust shavings to go in it to soak up the moisture, and that's ready to go on a hive and keep them dry all winter.